It's me, your boy, Auteur Deluxe. I just think it's funny to not use a tripod when I could, like, definitely use a tripod. So this is gonna have, like, a Blair Witch vibe. Um, I finally picked a movie. I finally decided on a movie to review, and it is Todd Solondz's 2001 Storytelling. There's definitely gonna be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie, maybe stop and watch it. If you haven't seen it or you're never gonna see it, then just watch this anyway. But yeah, I picked this movie for a couple different reasons. I knew I wanted to do a Todd Solondz movie because he is one of my favorite filmmakers. He's definitely one of my like formative filmmakers. One of the first ones I really got into. Because you're into movies when you're a kid. Like you think everything is fucking Fern Gully and Home Alone, or like Die Hard or whatever, and then you hit that age where you see some real shit, and for me at least, that's what like springboarded me into really liking movies. Once I realized it's not all Ransom and fucking Ace Ventura, and the movie for me that really did that was American History X. That was the movie that I saw where I was like, holy shit, a movie can do this. But when I kind of branched out a little bit, Todd Solondz was really one where I was like, okay, I identify with this guy, I like what he's doing, and I want to see everything he's ever done, everything he ever will do. So Storytelling was his first movie I kind of sought out on my own. I had a friend who showed me Happiness, the movie Happiness, and I loved it, thought it was amazing, and the next one I sought out was Storytelling. So that's why we're doing Storytelling. I think it's important to kind of get representation for filmmakers that don't have a lot on YouTube as far as like these kind of videos, like blogger, dork, motherfuckers. Because you see a lot of people blowing Christopher Nolan. You see a lot of people doing like ending explained and like Easter egg movies or Easter egg videos on movies that just came out, or like over dissecting Marvel movies. People need to talk about Todd Solondz. I'm gonna talk about Todd Solondz. So, Storytelling came out in 2001. Brief summary of the plot. It has two different parts that thematically they match up, but they're completely different actors and actresses, completely different settings. Actually, kind of similar setting, but they're not related as far as the characters or the story goes. And part one is called Fiction. It's got Selma Blair playing Vi, and she is in a college course. College or high school, I don't know, I think it's college, but she's in a creative writing class with her boyfriend who actually has cerebral palsy, and she is getting bad grades, getting bad marks, and everybody's kind of criticizing her writing. Anyway, she has some kind of encounter with her teacher and writes about it, and they still criticize her and say it's unbelievable. This is trite, this is not very well written, this is unimaginative, this unbelievable story. And she screams out, she's like, well, this really happened. So that's part one. Part two is Nonfiction. This is where we follow Toby, played by Paul Giamatti. He's a documentary filmmaker, and he is making his first movie. You see, he says he's a documentary filmmaker, but he's, I don't know, he's a real sad guy. And I think he's trying to kind of recapture his best years, which in his eyes are his high school years. So he's doing a documentary film on the subject about the college application process, the SATs, and getting into college. And this is where he finds Scooby Livingston, and he ends up following his family, and he goes through some trials and tribulations as far as editing the documentary film and just in Scooby's life, what unfolds. So that's the basic plot summary. And as far as the film itself, visually there's not a lot going on here. There's nothing to really write home about. There's not like breathtaking scenes or anything like that. This is really character-driven, really story-driven. It's not really a linear story, but the things that happen are what's important in the movie more than even the performances. Most of the performances are kind of okay. John Goodman's good. I like John Goodman in anything. Paul Giamatti actually is probably the best performance in the movie as a documentary filmmaker, and you could tell he's kind of based on Todd Solondz, and he's good He's based on Todd Solondz's Insecurities. So he's playing a documentary filmmaker that's bad and is very pretentious, and he's very demeaning, looking down on his son. On the surface, you have this kind of provocative movie with a couple shocking things going on. There is a rape. There is some racial tension. There's a guy with CP, cerebral palsy. He's a cerebral person, though. That's a joke in the movie. Sorry. There is gassing. There are people. A whole family is killed in the movie. Spoiler alert. I don't think this could come out now. If this came out now, Twitter would explode. Honestly, the sex scene alone, Twitter would explode. And during the rape scene, in order to keep a R rating instead of an NC-17, which, thinking about it, I don't know why he didn't just cut the scene out or like focus on something else and like have it going on audibly in the background. But Todd Solondz leaves in a giant red box covering over Selma Hayek and her teacher having sex in order to keep that in the movie and not have to have an NC-17 rating subject. So on the surface level, you have this pretty unnerving story, and I think that's what drew me to this as a kid. But when you see it again as an adult, or I see it again years later, clearly the subtext going on is this is Solondz firing back at his critics. This is after Happiness came out, which is probably gave him the most exposure. I think Welcome to the Dollhouse is pretty universally liked, or not necessarily universally liked, but not as there's not as much going on that's offensive per se as there is in Happiness. So this movie really shows Solondz firing back, and you see this clearly in the scene in the creative writing kind of circle in the classroom when all the classmates of Selma Blair, she's reading her story about the actual rape that she went through, and everybody's saying, "Oh, this is overdone." They claim it's misogynistic. They claim it's racist, and this is what actually happened to her. And I think this kind of parallels Todd Solondz when the critics were trashing Happiness, saying this is ugly, this is controversial, this is showing cruelness, this is showing things you don't want to see in a movie. He's saying, much like Selma Blair's character, saying, this really happened to me. Todd Solondz is saying, this is my truth, this is the truth. Life is crushing, life is horrific, can be horrific, and I'm going to expose those parts of life in my films. And he's done that throughout his career. And I do believe that scene is really him firing back. And I think the Toby character really is like a projection of Todd Solondz, him showing himself, or at least his insecurities of how he perceives himself. And it's showing him exploiting Scooby as this sad loser kid. But when you think back to when we're introduced to Toby, when he's looking through his fucking yearbook, calling his classmates from 10 years ago, that's sad. He's the sad one. He's exploiting others when he's really just as sad, if not more sad than his subject. Also, in the scenes in the kind of edit bay with Toby's character talking to his producer, and he is kind of second guessing the film, and he's saying he needs to see it with an audience, and this part's funny, and what if they laugh at this part? This part's intentionally funny, but this part's unintentionally funny. How are they going to perceive this? And that is 100% Todd Solondz. He talks about this in interviews. He is petrified of when the audience is laughing when they're not supposed to. And I've seen this in his films. If you go to a screening of a Todd Solondz film, you will see this. In particular, the Sunshine Family in Palindromes, which is this family of like Christian disabled children that were saved from abortion, and they're singing and dancing with headsets to like pop Christian music. And it is funny, but it's sad and it's horrible to see. And people were belly laughing when you see this in theaters. Same thing with Happiness. There's the scene where literally his therapist, Philip Seymour Hoffman's character's therapist, is fucking kids and going on a shooting spree during a nap. He has a dream about going on a shooting spree, and people in the audience are laughing. And I think there is some intentional humor in Todd Solondz's movies, but for the most part, he's taking himself very seriously, and these are very honest characters that come from deep within him and from his upbringing, not literally, but just parts of people he's known. And it's horrific for him to see people laughing at some of these things. But I think there is also intentional humor in his films. I read an article where the interviewer called his films black comedies, and he kind of recoiled in horror and said, no, they're not black comedies, they're sad comedies. He rejects that term because he is very against the exploitative nature of exploiting these people because they're fucked up. There can be funniness within being fucked up, but to exploit them because they're fucked up is fucked up. And that's basically what the wrap up end of the movie is saying, where Scooby goes and sees the screening of his documentary and he's a laughingstock, and Toby has completely exploited him. But he looks into the camera and says, "You've got a hit." Solondz would never want to exploit people in order to make a hit. I think the main message of this film, aside from the kind of self-criticism, like meta thing of Solondz kind of clapping back at his critics, I think the main takeaway here is that life is crushing. Life is terrible. It's full of ugliness. It is unfair. It is unflinching and unfair. And life is unfair in several ways in the film. Consuelo, the way she is treated in general is unfair. The fact that her son is killed, the fact that Brady goes into a coma just playing football, and also the fact that Scooby makes it into Princeton when he's a fucking idiot. Life is unfair. Toby sees that, and he sees that as ridiculous that he made it into Princeton. But on top of that, Solondz is saying there are different ways of dealing with this. Scooby, who just rolls with it, he doesn't care that life is unfair. He's just gonna get high, and his friend blows him at some point, and he's just doing his own thing, and he's gonna bullshit. It's kind of like the Frank Grimes episode of The Simpsons. Like, he's just fucking around, and he gets into fucking Princeton. Or you can be horrified by the way life is, like Vi's character in part 1, who can't believe no one is taking her at her word, and no one is believing her story. So I think that's the main takeaway, is just this existential thing of life being terrible. But also, I think where Solondz gets kind of uppity about humor being misconstrued in his movies, I think he is provocateur, and he is using humor in the fact that at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, the Livingstons, a very Jewish family who speak about this many times in the movie, are gassed by their housekeeper. So I know I shouldn't laugh at that because I like being employed. Solondz likes to claim that he's just being honest and being truthful, but he is absolutely pushing buttons to put that as the end of his film. Anyway, that's all I really have. I love this movie. I think everybody should watch it. It's on Amazon for like $3. Go watch it. And also, there are a lot of sneaky, well, not so sneaky, but there are a lot of cameos in this movie that are exciting. We have Mary Lynn Ricegub from Mr. Show and 24. We have the girl that plays Tammy Littlenut, Maria Thayer. She plays Tammy Littlenut in Strangers with Candy. We have Tully from Kids. Tully's in this fucking movie. The guy from American Movie, I didn't notice this when I saw this movie as a kid, but the guy from American Movie who's like, not even an actor, but he is kind of a nice homage to himself in this movie. Conan O'Brien's in this movie, and the Ween album The Pod is in this movie, which I never noticed before either. I'd say if you are open-minded about movies and you don't want everything to be like fucking Jack Reacher, yeah, go see this and seek out Todd Solondz's other movies. That's it for now. I think I know what I'm gonna do next week, but I don't want to commit, so we'll see next week. Alright, thanks, bye.